Hello and welcome to Forever Sports. Very interesting news this week with SA Rugby officially announcing the new Growing the Game makeover, a major reform and restructuring of SA Rugby to start enhancing departments and aspects of SA Rugby that maybe aren't performing as well as they probably should do. And it's always an interesting one when you talk about there being a lot of flaws in SA Rugby because a lot of it's masked by the performance of the Springboks. And, we've known for a while that, for example, the women's game has been quite sort of far behind. The under 20 setup, for example, hasn't been quite right. We've been struggling, for example, with Curry Cup and, sort of those teams. And how do we sort of fix everything else apart from the Springboks, who, as we can see and as we know, continue to perform at really, really high levels. So it's an interesting one, isn't it, in terms of having to sort of understand what's going wrong when at the very highest of high levels, we are the best. And I think the main thing is that we're kind of the best despite a couple of deficiencies. And if we were to get those right, we could take on a whole different level. And I personally think SRAB could. There's no reason why I shouldn't be dominating in the sevens, in the men's, in the women's. Domestically, for example, it should just be all around the top rugby nation in the world, as far as I'm concerned. If you look at the talent, the pathways, some of the systems that we have in place, competitions such as like the Varsity Cup and the likes, we've got everything we need. We've got all the ingredients to become a rugby powerhouse, and we are. We're two-time four-time World Cup winners, two back-to-back World Cups now. So the question is now, where do we improve? And this is what this whole restructure has basically done. And it has obviously been spearheaded by Rian Olholzer, who said that there was a mandate from the Executive Council basically to ring fence the Springboks and say, right, that structure works. The Springboks works. We don't need to worry about that. How do we get everything else right? And basically to then restructure the rest of the rugby department within SA Rugby to ensure it is fit for purpose and capable of optimizing the performance of all national teams. That is what Rian Olholzer had to say. So if we go and look at what this means, for example, this was a press release or the article that came out yesterday. So we'll go through it and talk a little bit about what some of this restructuring could potentially mean. So they've basically done a reorganization. So there are going to be 4 new work streams which will function alongside the Springboks. Once again, Springboks, nothing's changing there. They will all have a general manager in charge of every single one of these, and that'll all report basically to the CEO, which is Rian Olholzer. Basically, this is all going to be kind of basically the 5 pillars of rugby in South Africa. So Dave Wessels, who has been part of SRA for a while, he will head up the new high performance department, which will drive enhanced performance across all national teams and elevate the entire high performance system. So basically, that is going to be the women's game, under 20s, URC teams, Curry Cup, basically also professional rugby and high performance rugby in the country is going to be overseen by Dave Wessel. That's going to be his sort of mandate. And the women obviously is a very big one, very big project at the moment. Swayze Brain coming in as head coach. We're seeing a lot of improvement because we've really gone and backed them. SA under 20s have got a new coaching structure. Malusi Matetwa was actually added to that team a couple of days ago. So big movements already happening in that regard. Then there's been a renaming of the strategic performance management, and that is now going to be called participation and development. And Ian Schwartz will be the GM of that. Basically, the idea of that is the growing the game, grassroots level, community competitions, for example. I imagine school level will probably go into that as well. And I think it's a good thing. I think we need to have an overhaul. The school system is a really strong system. How do we add more schools to the ecosystem, for example? How do we really grow that to sort of schools that might not have been included up until now? Because if we can have such good school rugby at the moment with there being a select few. Imagine we start doubling the amount of schools, for example, playing at that kind of level and the likes. How do we get women's rugby growing in the earlier stages? How do we make sure that women's rugby is being played at, 50, 60, 70% of schools across the country? There's then a referees department, which is going to be headed up by Banks Yantolo. And the idea is that it's going to be growing the base of the match officials and ensuring skill development with an emphasis on high performance as well as inclusivity and gender diversity. So it's about making sure that we're not just producing, for example, male referees, that Amy Bad is not by herself. And there are lots of other women referees coming through, but she's a really good example of a success story of a South African women's referee. And it's about making sure that match officials can be absolutely anybody, because that's the whole point of it, isn't it? You don't necessarily have to be the biggest, strongest, best rugby player to be a match official. It's about the understanding of the game, your application of the game, and that should open a lot of doors to different pathways into getting involved in rugby, is being within the match official setup. And that doesn't necessarily even mean being a referee. It's, your fourth officials, it's your TMOs and your touch judges and stuff like that. How do you get involved from that perspective? It's your match referees and stuff like that. Applying the laws of the game and being involved in committees that, for example, decide on the laws of the game. And then finally, there's a medical department which will be headed by Clint Redhead, and they'll provide specialized attention to player safety, welfare, health, wellness, and safeguarding. Very, very important. Basically, it's about looking after our rugby players across the country. Again, not just Arcus Neyman's injury. How do we make sure that in the communities where rugby's been played on a Saturday, how are we making sure that player welfare is crucially being done properly? How do we make sure that the coaches, for example, across the country understand how to work with children, how to work with kids of different ages? How do you make sure you vet the coaches so that you've got the right people dealing with, young players and young women players, for example? And how do we make sure that we can promote all these things, but in a very safe way? How do we make sure that head contact can be kept as minimal and we can move away from head injuries? How do we decrease the amount of head injuries? How do we make rugby a game where parents are not scared of signing their children up, of making sure that the next generation is going to come through, playing rugby at different levels, playing full contact rugby, but in a safe environment? And you can't ever, take the risk away immediately. But at the end of the day, it's about, making sure that it's within an acceptable amount. Because as soon as you get to that 1% where the risk to reward is too high, then we've got to scale back. It's about finding a percentage that you can kind of work to live with and not a single percent more. Because that's the reality. If the game's not safe to play, people won't play it. And, it's such a bad example. Oh, the game's gone soft. The game's been played at a more physical level than it ever has been before. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. You look at modern day sports science and that type of athletes that are being produced, and the sheer colossal sort of scale of collisions, for example, that are happening. It is more of a physical game than ever before, even at low levels, and it's how do we make sure we make it safe. So, in theory, according to Rian Olberholz, it says that this new structure is designed to provide increased focus in specific areas and ensure that every aspect of rugby, from player development to health and officiating, receives the focus and expertise it requires to enable success. The high performance department includes all national teams apart from the Springboks, as well as operational team service and athletic performance. So it's not just about the Bok women in the camp. It's about how do they make sure that the Bok women players, for example, are getting the support they need in the off season and the likes. He said, "We are very excited about the participation development department, which encompasses several key areas, including gender inclusive community rugby development, player and coach development. Coach development, I think, is very, very important. Training and education, transformation, data management, and funding and partnerships. Basically, taking rugby to the country, to all corners of the country." He finally then said that Banks and Clint's promotion are well deserved. Both of them have been with SRA for a very long time. They know the department, etc. And basically, after a successful placement process in the reorganization departments, SRA employees have transitioned into new roles, which kicked off on the 1st of November. So this is not about to come into effect. It has come into effect. This is how SA Rugby, from a rugby point of view, is now being run. What do you think? Is this going to take us to the next level? Is this lip service and it's going to be more the same? I'm personally I like the idea. In theory, once again, it's a nice plan. It comes down to the execution now, whether those 4 managers can get the job done in every one of their departments and work together to create a rugby ecosystem that is going to produce world champs after world champs after world champs. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Smash the like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.